We're hearing again today that strike action will continue. I'm focusing tonight on teachers. They're going to be going on strike for about 7 days over the next 2 months. The first walkout will take place on the 1st of February. I have to say, though, not all the teaching unions are back for strikes. Do you remember last week we had a teacher on here, didn't we? And his union actually adverted they didn't get the turnout. I think they got 42% instead of the 50 that they needed. Anyway, Education Secretary, she's saying, Jacqueline, that the teachers are turning their backs on pupils. Is she right?
Yeah, she's absolutely spot on. And I just think this situation is totally avoidable. I think it's totally unnecessary. In my former life, a long time ago, I was a trade union negotiator for about 13 years.
Oh, was you?
I was, yes.
In which industry?
In the airline industry.
Right.
So I spent 3 years as some of the older viewers will know, as a shop steward in the Transport and General Workers Union, I was one of the first female shop stewards at the time.
Good for you.
And then a number of years later, we formed a new union, and so I was one of the founder members there, and I was one of the senior negotiators there for about 10 years. So I'm not somebody that's sitting here that doesn't believe that anyone can go on strike. That's not where I'm coming from. Where I'm coming from is the fact that I think what's not being taken into account, not just in the education sector, but in others, with the situation at the moment, is the purgatory, basically, that this country went through over the couple of years of COVID. And if we bring that then to the education system, we had children who were, frankly, in my view, let down at times. I think there were times that they didn't need to be taken out of school. Other countries prove that. I hope that isn't the case ever in the future. And we saw that there were issues then with safeguarding. We saw cases arising after all of those situations where the children weren't at school, where children who were vulnerable were not being monitored, and we saw some horrendous results of that.
Alpha Hughes pops to my mind.
Absolutely. And so with regards to now, I mean, frankly, if I'm being absolutely honest, all of the public sector that have now obviously joined in and decided that they think that they should go on, I wouldn't have given anybody in the public sector an increase at this time. I think I would have liked to have said to the public sector, you know, the public supported the entire public sector throughout all of COVID. Nobody lost their jobs. Everyone kept their contracts of employment, which was right, because we wanted to make sure we had a foundation to build on post-COVID. But the private sector, you know, these small businesses, people took an absolute hammering. As we said, children were badly affected. You know, it was absolutely awful. So to now, you know, one union after another, one area after another, particularly in the public sector, and of course the rail strikes too. I just think that that's been so inappropriate at this time. I'm not saying at some stage in the future that you know all of these areas should have a pay increase. I'm not saying that at all. I just think that the timing is dreadful, and I certainly wouldn't support them striking at all.
Oh, harsh words. Wouldn't support these strikes at all. Do you, Emma?
Yes, of course I do. It is absolutely their right to strike. Public sector pay is significantly lower than private sector pay.
No,
and yes, they are. The public sector raises are on average 2 to 3%. Private sector raises on average of 7%. So we are seeing a significant widening of the gap between private sector pay and public sector pay. We have a recruitment problem in schools. We are not seeing enough new teachers being recruited, and that has two impacts. First of all, it means that when teachers are having more work to do, they're working longer hours and covering more work. It also means that we are not seeing the kind of, the reason that people are not joining the teaching profession is because they're not being paid to do so. We're not attracting people into the teaching profession, and people who are suffering long term. It's not the children who are going to lose a day of schooling, but the children whose education is being massively impacted by the fact that we do not value teachers properly in this country.
You say that we're not enticing people into the sector enough, but I mean, I've got some figures here published by the IFS which show the entrance to the teacher training schemes relative to their targets. So, for example, you know, you're saying that we're not. If you look at 100% of your target, there's not many of the subjects that are falling way below that. Some of them are over the target. Actually.
Some of them are over the target. A lot of them are below that, and I can see that from the figures you've got. We've got ones at 70%. That's 3 out of 10 not being filled. That's not OK. It's not OK to fall that far behind in a country, as a G7 country, where we should be absolutely fundamentally saying that educating our youth is our top priority. It is not OK to devalue it that much.
Do you think it's based on money that you can't get these people in?
I think it's part of it. I think money and conditions. And these strikes are not just about wages, they are also about conditions.
Well, before I come back to Jackie, you talk about conditions. I'll tell you about conditions, because you reference, for example, the public sector pay in reference to private sector. Many people, using your terms of conditions, you'd say, well, hang on a second, because if you look at a lot of these public sector workers, first and foremost, in more cases they're not, they've got a job for life, they have job security that you often wouldn't get in the private sector. You have pensions that would make your eyes water. There'd be the stuff of dreams for many private sector workers. So there's lots of different things, actually, when it comes beyond pay that would entice someone into the public sector. But, Jackie, let me stick with pay for a second.
Yeah.
If you do look at the pay, to be fair to these teachers, they have had, in real terms, a pay cut over the last decade. So what the unions would say and all the rest of it is they just want fairness. They want their workers to be able to afford a decent standard of living in these tough times.
Well, I don't think they have all had pay cuts at all. I mean, of course we can measure things by inflation, and we've got high inflation at the moment. Nobody denies that. I'm surprised we've got an economy, frankly, after 2 years of what we've been through with COVID. And I think it's quite wrong to say, you may say that some of the pay increases that have gone on maybe in the last few months for the private sector have been a bit higher. But what you don't mention is the number of businesses and the number of people who lost their jobs during COVID who still haven't got a job.
But furlough was available
but
in the private sector too.
In terms, if we're talking about, I know many teachers, I know, many people in the public sector. When I joined British Airways, it was in the public sector, and then it was privatised a number of years later. So all I'm saying is nobody wants, low wages for people. Of course, people need to be recompensed properly, but we also have to be able to cut our cloth. We have to be able to pay what we can afford. And it's not that just the government that turns around and says, you will get 3% or 1% or whatever. We have pay review bodies for a very good reason.
Yeah.
And they are independent and they make recommendations. I don't recall, actually, when the pay review body in recent years has made a recommendation to government for either health or the nurses or whoever, and it's not actually being carried through.
Well, it happened within the health sector less than 2 years ago,
well,
so it does happen, and it happens frequently. And the government do overrule, but they can overrule them.
Hang on, don't talk over each other.
If I may just say, and in addition to the teachers, when I started school, teachers didn't have teaching assistants. It's good to see these days. You see all classes now, and teachers have teaching assistants. That was never, ever the case. Certainly, until a number of years ago. And I think that's good because that frees the teacher themselves up to be focusing on other things to do as well. And so, I think teachers are valued. I think nurses are. I think people are valued by the public. But I think a lot of the public would say, fair's fair. We have to now, we've got to get this economy back on its feet. Unless we have got a successful, thrusting private sector, unless we're bringing in investment, unless we're looking at entrepreneurs and people to say, come, start your company, start a business, unless we have a productive private sector, we don't generate the money
and
to pay for a public sector.
And the way to get a successful private sector economy is to have a really well-educated workforce.
I'm aware of it.
And in order to do that, we need to have a well-educated, well-remunerated and satisfied workforce enabled to teach and inspire those kids.
How much pay rise do you think they should get then?
I don't want to put a number on it because I'm not in the negotiating table.
This annoys me, because you're very happy to sit there and say, pay is not enough, we're letting everyone down, so you make really bold statements.
I'd give them all 100 grand a year if I could, but I'm not the Secretary of State for Education, thank God.
No, but you must have a view. You've got a view on all the rest of it.
I think that teachers should earn above the average wage. I think that you should be able to see teaching as a profession that you can live comfortably on for life. I think that teachers who are also parents too, by the way. Let's not have this separation of there's teachers over here and parents over here. Most teachers have kids. So we are talking about people who are in charge of our future. There is nothing to me more valuable than that. I would have teachers teaching tiny classes well remunerated, and I think that that is an investment in our future.
Just to be clear, by the way, when you start getting to the higher grades of teaching, which most of the teachers are on, they do earn above average wages.
They earn above average, but not massively above average. Not the kind of wages that you would get if you were teaching in, say, a private school. You would get a massive salary. Why aren't we investing in that kind of a future for our kids?
But what you're also not wishing to emphasise is the public sector have very good packages. It's not just about your level of pay. It wasn't just about the level of pay when I was in British Airways. It was also about the pension schemes that were available. It was also about being covered fully if you were on maternity leave, if you were off sick. I mean, there are a whole raft of things when you're in full-time employment or you're on contracts in the public sector that isn't just about the level of pay, notwithstanding the employer is paying in, i.e. the government, the taxpayer, double the amount to go into those pensions, which is fine.
You couldn't be more right. It's great that they have good conditions. So should the private sector. Go on strike, guys.
You're focusing just on the take-home rate without the package.
I'm focusing on their day-to-day living. We need to have teachers who can live comfortably day to day.
The teachers I know can live on their salaries.
The
teachers I know live very well on their salaries. They are on holiday as often as anybody else I know.
Well, you know some very well-remunerated teachers. I don't.
Well, they're working in the public sector.
Well, good. I'm glad that there are occasions where that happens. It doesn't happen often enough. It should be the rule, not the exception.
But you're paid on grades, on how long you've been there. Like any company or any business, you will generally, the longer you've been there.
Yeah, but you also reach a top level of those grades, and you can't get further on. And so
you can move on. Look at the pay grade
only
structure.
If you go into the management structure. And actually, I don't want every teacher becoming a head teacher. I want really great teachers staying in the classroom.
Before you get to head teachers.
Speaking of head teachers, I'll just finish on this thing because I have to say it did make me laugh, quite frankly. The National Association of Head Teachers, they balloted their members to see whether or not they wanted to go on strike action. They didn't get their turnout. They had to get 50% of turnout. They only managed to achieve 42%. And this is why it made me laugh. Because that union, the NAHT's General Secretary, said the following. It is incredibly frustrating that he says the anti-trade union basically legislation has compelled us to conduct the ballot by post, get this, during a period in which the management of the Royal Mail refused to take action to ameliorate the disruption to the postal service. So he is not being able to get his members on strike. The reason because they didn't get the turnout, he's blaming the fact they didn't get the turnout on the post strikes. You couldn't make it up. So this union doesn't like the disruption caused by strike action. Weird that. Anyway, what's your thoughts? Have you got kids at school? Are you a teacher? If you're a teacher, by the way, congrats to you. I wouldn't be a teacher for all the love nor money in the world. Anne, you say, I like this idea, by the way, Anne. How about it's time to fine the teachers for not allowing our kids to go to school because they're very quick to find parents for taking pupils out of school, aren't they, when it comes to things like holidays? I think you're very interesting on that one, Derek. The teachers are no different and all the other groups that simply want more money. The unions know only one way to negotiate, and that is to hold the country to ransom. One of the unions, by the way, who didn't get the turnout as well, they were saying they wouldn't have any conversations unless they got a minimum of 12%. So many people now asking for above inflation rises. Adrian, no one should get a pay rise apart from the nurses and the paramedics. They are the most important and it should be settled, but it's everyone's right to strike. I don't agree with you, by the way, Adrian. I don't think that if you're in emergency services, I don't think you should be able to strike. I know that's controversial and will upset some of you, but that is my view. Julie says, what about giving teachers more money in their pockets, but cut their pensions to fund it? That sentiment is one that's come through quite a lot. And Robert says, it is immoral to go on strike over inflation, which will go down in time. We had 2 years of education disrupted by COVID. Yes, but Robert, if you can't afford to live, turning around to, I don't know, your greengrocer and saying, I want this food, but I'll pay you in 2 years' time when things have got a bit cheaper, it won't wash with him, would it? Anyway, keep your thoughts coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email address.